Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be starting my first weekend reading vlog. So far I have done some longer vlogs that have taken a week, 2 weeks, something like that. I haven't done any vlogs that are this short. So we're going to just see how this goes. But Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia on her Patreon every month does a weekend reading challenge where we see how much we can read in a weekend. Now, Chantel on her Patreon typically does a week-long reading challenge. And there may be a point where I go ahead and do a vlog for one of those. But right now for the rest of the year, what I would like to try to do is each weekend that Tiffany is hosting a weekend reading challenge on her Patreon, I am going to do one of these vlogs where I'm going to focus on trying to finish books that I started sometime prior to the current month. So it may be books I started this year, it may be books I started earlier. But I'm at least going to try to get through 2 or 3 books each weekend that she hosts the reading challenge. The books that I have picked out for this weekend are both books that I started in early 2023. And I still haven't finished them. The first one is Inkspell by Cornelia Funke. This is the second book in the Inkheart trilogy, and this is a book that I started years ago. I got 100 pages in, and I was just absolutely bored. I could not get through the book. I loved Inkheart, but I could not get through that book for some reason. So I ended up DNF'ing it. And then last year, I think in January or February, I decided to borrow it from my library and give it another try. I think I read about 75 pages and then it was due back to the library. And I'm pretty sure I'd already renewed it once, and I don't like renewing books more than once. There were just other books that I checked out around the same time, and I was very late getting to that one. But what I did read of it, I really enjoyed. Now, the downside is I'm probably going to have to reread at least some of what I read last year. I think I remember enough of the early parts of the story, and sorry if you can hear the lawnmower outside, but with this kind of reading vlog, I just have to film when I can film. There's some of it that I remembered from the first time I tried to read it, and since I just reread it last year, I know there's still some that I remember from that reading. So I don't need to reread all 75 pages, but there is probably some that I'm going to have to reread. My hope is to actually finish the book by the end of the weekend. That's going to be a push. This is a Friday, Saturday, Sunday weekend. I only have 3 days to get through it, and it is well over 500 pages. It is also a middle grade, so that makes it a little easier, but it is a lot to get through in one weekend, especially when it's not the only book I'm working on, because the other one I'm going to be working on is Hawthorne short stories, which are all short stories by Nathaniel Hawthorne, as you could probably guess from the title. And at this point, I believe I have about 10 of the short stories left. And I show you my bookmark and say you can see my progress, but you really can't, because I don't know how the stories are actually ordered in here, to be honest. It looks like they're ordered by the collection that they were eventually published in, but most, if not all of these, were originally published in magazines. So they were published well before they were actually put in a collection. And after the table of contents, which lists the stories in the order they're printed in the book, it also lists the chronological order in which they were originally published. And I'm reading them in publication order, not the order they are in the book. So even though I could say, see where I'm at in the book, that's very deceptive, because I've read some of the stories that come after the bookmark, and there's some of the stories before the bookmark that I haven't read. So I still have a ways to go, and getting through 10 stories in 3 days is not going to be an easy feat. Again, with also working on Inkspell at the same time. But I am determined to get through some of the books that I have in progress that I've basically soft DNF'd. Not intentionally, expecting I would get back to them soon, just put them down and didn't end up picking them back up. So my main goal with this is that I would really like to start the new year with no books in progress that I started prior to December of 2024. That is my ultimate goal. Because I do understand if I start a book in December, there is a chance I won't get it finished by the beginning of the next year. But that should also mean that I'm still actively reading it. So I will probably finish it in early January. But all of these books that have been sitting unfinished for anywhere from a month to apparently close to 2 years, I need to get them done. So these are the ones that I'm starting with for this vlog. I believe in November I will probably be doing a lot of nonfiction because of Nonfiction November, and I have several nonfiction in progress. And then December we'll just have to see. I don't know for sure what I will have started and not finished by then, what will still be a soft DNF on my list by the time December rolls around, because I might get to some of them, I might not, we will see. But that's going to be my goal with these vlogs. At this point, I have not started working on either one of these books. I did borrow Inkspell through Hoopla, so I have at least taken that step. But I was actually going to borrow it yesterday from my library, where I got it last year, and discovered they no longer carry it. They carry books 1 and 3. They do not carry Inkspell anymore, which I find really odd. And I'm disappointed in myself because another library I go to, I was there when my kids were in youth group earlier this week, and they have Inkspell. But I decided not to get it because the other library is closer to my house, so it's a little more convenient for me to return the book when the time comes. So I decided not to borrow it from the library further away, only to find out the closer library doesn't have it anymore. So I ended up borrowing it on Hoopla, which is not my preferred way to read big books, but that's the way it ultimately worked out. So I don't know for sure what our plans are for the entire weekend. I do know that we have a small group meeting with some people from our church tonight. It's our first time getting together, so I have no idea what to expect. I don't know how long it's going to go. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we do have that meeting tonight. And then on Sunday, our church is actually doing a Fall Fest service. So we're having our church service, and then afterwards we're having a potluck and games and all sorts of stuff going on. So I know we have that going this weekend. Beyond that, I'm not sure, but I'm just going to take you along this weekend, and we'll see what else we get done and what kind of reading I get done. We are already done with school for the day, so I don't have that anymore, but we are planning to take an appetizer tonight. I just haven't figured out what I'm going to make yet. So I need to go figure that out as well. So I guess we'll just find out together. Good afternoon, everyone. So I may have forgotten to actually show you guys what I made last night for our small group. It was something I've had before, but I've never made before. And I got caught up in making it and trying to get it done on time, and I kind of forgot to film. So it's a Mexican dip that is hamburger, rice, tomato sauce, and a bunch of seasonings. So it was really good. I just didn't get any footage. And then this morning, as you saw, I've been doing a lot of work in my bedroom because I kind of realized a few weeks ago that Monday through Friday in the mornings we do school. Sunday in the mornings we're going to church. Saturdays, I'm really not doing anything in the mornings, like specifically in the mornings. And honestly, there's things I need to get done for this channel, for Instagram, and even with just getting homeschool stuff done, that I really need some time to just be able to work by myself without being interrupted. And so I talked to my husband a couple weeks ago and said, what if on Saturday mornings I take 2 or 3 hours and I just work by myself, no interruptions, and then the rest of the day I can spend with everybody else, but I at least get that time to work on stuff when I'm not already busy during the day with school or something else. And so that's what we've been doing. So far it's working out pretty well because it gives me a chance to, get some pictures taken for Instagram. It gives me a chance to get caught up on reviews, to get caught up on videos, different things like that. So I've been enjoying having those couple of hours once a week where I get to just work, and it's in the morning, not at night after the kids have gone to bed. And it takes some of the load off my plate in the evenings because I know if things can wait until Saturday morning. And things like taking pictures for Instagram, I need to take those in the morning when I have decent light, not at night when the only lighting I have is the light in the bedroom. So it's just a good chance for me to get some things done that really need to be done during the day. Now, as far as my reading for the weekend, I will be honest, I didn't get as much done as I wanted, but we had homeschool yesterday and we had our small group. And by the time we got home, it was, I think, 9:30. We were all tired. We put the kids straight to bed. My husband and I pretty much went straight to bed. I did a little bit of reading before I actually went to sleep, but not a lot. So I read, I think, a chapter and a half of Inkspell, and I read one story from the Nathaniel Hawthorne short stories. So not a lot of reading got done yesterday. I've already done more reading today than Friday, so that's a plus. But the story I read yesterday in Hawthorne short stories was called Egotism, or there's a second name to it, or The Bosom Serpent. And this one was really interesting. He has some stories that are just, they have kind of an odd feeling to them, but they're really interesting in what they're discussing. So this one is about a man who is visited by a friend of his after, I think, 5 or 10 years of them not seeing each other. And when his friend sees him, he's like, he doesn't even look like himself anymore. He looks so pale and haggard, and just, these 5 years have clearly taken a toll on him. He starts learning the story from the people in town that the man has been complaining of a serpent in his chest, or a serpent in his bosom, for the last 5 years. And that it's gnawing at him and eating at him. And basically, whether you ultimately want to agree that there was an actual serpent gnawing at him or not, it all comes down to this idea of his sins were gnawing away at him. And he sees serpents in other people. Because people talk about him telling them that, you have a serpent in your heart, you have a serpent in your stomach, you have a serpent here, and it's because of jealousy, or it's because of this other thing. And even though this story seems to be, at least for him, it seems to be a literal thing, it's still great imagery of the way sin can gnaw away at a person. I really enjoyed that story. Then this morning I read The Celestial Railroad. And this was very different because this one is an allegory. And it uses people and places from The Pilgrim's Progress, which unfortunately I have not read. I've been planning to read the book for a while, but I don't have a copy of it. And for some reason I've never looked to see if it's available in my library apps or not. But at some point I now have extra reason to pick it up. I want to read The Pilgrim's Progress and then read The Celestial Railroad again. I had to do some research on this because I was like, I'm not 100% certain what direction he was wanting to go with this. So I looked it up. The Celestial Railroad apparently is an allegory where he uses elements from the Pilgrim's Progress to illustrate the issues he had with some of the religious ideas of his time. The main one I saw mentioned was transcendentalism. So he has characters with names like you would see in Pilgrim's Progress. Like he has some reverends that he mentions, and he has Reverend Mr. Stumble at Truth, Reverend Mr. Clog the Spirit, Reverend Dr. Wind of Doctrine, and then there's some other people that he meets. Like he has Mr. Smooth It Away, who's with him the entire time. Mr. Live for the World, Mr. Hide Sin in the Heart. So he uses the same type idea that John Bunyan did in The Pilgrim's Progress, where he names characters after a trait about them. It is a really interesting story, but like I said, I do want to read The Pilgrim's Progress and then reread this one. So that's how far I got with that one. And Inkspell, I have to go look this one up. So I read a chapter and a half yesterday, and I read 2.5 chapters this morning. So, like I said, I've already read more than yesterday, but I'm going to have to get a lot more work done today if I'm going to finish either of these 2 books by the end of the weekend. I'm kind of thinking at this point, there's a really good chance that I won't, but at least making some progress on these books that have been sitting unread, unfinished for so long will at least be nice. So the more I can get done, the better, whether I finish them or not. I am hoping to, but we'll just have to see how it goes. I also know Friday was my busiest day, so there's a chance I will at least get more done the next couple days. I just don't know how much for sure. So we will see. But I had to look this up because stories are not in the order that I'm reading them. So the next story I'm going to be reading in here is The Antique Ring, which I don't know if it says. That one was published in 1843, the same year as Egotism and The Celestial Railroad. The next one after that would be The Birthmark, but I've already read that one, so I'll be skipping it. But I have The Antique Ring, and then that's the end of his stories from 1843. So that's where I'm at with that one. And then I'm not sure how I'm going to talk about Inkspell because obviously it's a second book in a series. I think when I get a little bit further into the book, I'll do an actual update on that one. But I've only read 5 chapters in total so far. Like, I didn't reread the first 2 chapters of the book. I started at chapter 3. So I've read through the first 5 chapters. When I get a little bit further into the book, I'll do another update and actually tell you what is going on in the book. It will be an entirely spoilery section, but I am going to want to talk at least a little bit about what's going on in the book and my thoughts on it. I'm just not really far enough into it at this point to warrant a spoilery section. So I'll talk to you guys about that one later. But that, I believe, is all I have for right now. I am going to go get lunch and probably try to get some other stuff done around the house. So I will talk with you guys later. Hey guys, so it is the end of the weekend reading challenge. Actually, it's a couple days past the end of the weekend reading challenge because I was going to film this update yesterday on Monday, knowing I wanted to give myself all of Sunday to be able to read as much as I could. And if you follow me on Instagram, you may have already seen this, but I discovered that my cat chewed through my microphone cord. So I had to order a new one, and I kind of scrapped my recording plans for yesterday. I was going to try to put this off until I got the new microphone in, but unfortunately, this video comes out in just under a week, and I like to give myself as much time to edit as possible. So I decided to go ahead and film this. Hopefully the sound quality isn't too bad. I'm also using my phone and not the camera because it's a little better about cutting out some of the white noise, but still not as good as actually having a microphone. So this isn't necessarily the ideal way for me to wrap up this vlog, but this is what we've got to work with. So first I want to talk about Inkspell. Did I finish Inkspell? Absolutely not. Am I surprised? Not really. I put a lot more time and effort into the other book I was working on this weekend, so I didn't make as much progress in Inkspell as I would have liked, but I did get through the first quarter of the book, which is, I think, around 175 pages in the ebook. I borrow ebooks from my Hoopla app, and so the page count is always higher than the actual book count, and the page count on that one was well over 600 pages. I am really enjoying the story, just unfortunately it's a really big book to try to finish in a weekend, and if it was the only thing I was working on, I'm still not sure that I would have finished it. But definitely with having another book, I'm not surprised that I didn't. I am going to get a little bit into spoilers on this, not quite so much on the book itself, but this will definitely be spoilers for the first book. So if you haven't read Inkheart and you don't want to be spoiled for it, I will have timestamps down below where you can skip ahead, or if it's easier, you can mute the video until this image disappears. So the first book in the series follows Mo and Maggie as they deal with some characters who got read out of their books. It seems that this is something that only like 1 or 2 people in the world can do, and Mo is one of them. Also, his daughter Maggie ends up being one of them. But there are some people who got read out of the book called Inkheart, and one of them just wants to go home. He does not want to be in this world. He just wants to go home. And then we have the villains from Inkworld, and they basically see this as a new place to conquer. So they have to deal with all of them. Then we get to Inkspell, and in this one we follow Dustfinger as he is finally able to go home. He finally gets read back into his story. Unfortunately, he's been gone for 10 years. So a lot has happened, a lot has changed, but even some of the people from his past are still a problem in this book. And the interesting part with this is not only are we seeing Inkworld through Dustfinger's eyes, someone who's lived there, who's, really knows this world, we're also seeing it through the eyes of Maggie, because she somehow manages to read herself and Farid into the world. And so I know we're going to get a lot of different perspectives in this book, because we have Dustfinger, who, like I said, he lived there, that was his world. We have Maggie, who has heard about it from her dad, her mom, probably from Dustfinger, and now she's getting to experience it for herself. Then we also have, I can't remember his name now, but he's the author of the book, and he's also in Inkworld. It's definitely going to be a different perspective between someone who lived there, someone who's heard about it and is visiting, and the person who created it. So I'm really interested to see where the book goes from here. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to put it on pause at this point and focus on the rest of the books I wanted to get to in October. But there's a good chance that when I do the weekend reading challenge in November, I will work a little bit more on this one again. We'll see. I don't know for sure. It depends on what and all I have to work on by the time that one rolls around, but I might. I will also say I did borrow the ebook through Hoopla, but on Sunday, I was really tired when we got home from church. I wanted to read Inkspell, but I was just struggling. So I ended up borrowing the audiobook through my Libby app. And I did not realize this when I borrowed it, but the audiobook is narrated by Brendan Fraser. And oh my goodness, is he so much fun to listen to. He does great with the accents. I love his Aunt Eleanor voice. I had a lot of fun listening to this one. So I definitely think whenever I pick it up again, I'm probably going to borrow the audiobook again. I will still get the ebook because sometimes it's hard to understand the accents. So I will still either borrow an ebook or actually borrow the physical book from my library the next time. But I was really enjoying listening to his narration of the story. I'm assuming he narrates all 3 books in the series. So if you're interested in the series and you like audiobooks, I would definitely recommend checking that one out. All right. Then the book that I spent pretty much the entire weekend focusing on was Hawthorne short stories. I'll shift over a little bit. I did end up finishing this. I did not finish it over the weekend. I finished it yesterday morning, but I only had 2 stories left at the end of the weekend. So I got through 8 of the 10, which I didn't think was doing too bad, especially considering that I started this well over a year ago. This is actually the book that has been, I guess, on my soft DNF pile the longest. I finally did some looking. I borrowed this from my library in January of 2023, and I think I probably read 2 or 3 stories out of here before it was due back, because I have a tendency to borrow 2 or 3 books at a time. And once they're due back, then I might renew them once, but then they go back because I just don't have time to get to every book I borrow. And this was one of them. So I bought it in the summer of 2023. I read a few more stories at that point. And then earlier this year, I was trying to read 2 or 3 stories a month, trying to get it done by the end of the year. But then over the summer, ended up putting it down because of books like Words of Radiance and A History of France and all those books where I was giving myself 3 months to try to get through them. And so this one got put on the back burner. And I was down to 10 books left at the beginning of the weekend, and now I am done with it, officially. Overall, I really enjoyed the stories in this book. There's some interesting ones. I'm going to try to do this as briefly as possible, but let me go over the stories that I read this weekend. I'm not going to try to go over every story that's in this book because there's 20 some stories, but at least the ones that I read over the weekend. I believe I already talked about Egotism and the Celestial Railroad. So the next one that I read was The Antique Ring. And this was the last one I needed to read that was published in 1843. And The Antique Ring is a story of a man who proposes to his girlfriend. And he bought an antique ring as an engagement ring. And he is a writer, so his now fiancé asks him to come up with a story, a legend, a history behind this ring. Who owned this ring in the past? How did it get passed down? How did it end up here between the two of them? And so then the rest of the book is him telling the story that he came up with for this ring. The next one was The Christmas Banquet. And this one, let me double check. I want to make sure I have the right story before I say this. Yes. So The Christmas Banquet is another story within a story. But the person telling the story is one of the characters from Egotism. And the 2 people he's telling the story to are the other 2 people from Egotism. Yeah, I was caught off guard at first because I saw the name Roderick and I was like, did he really name 2 characters Roderick? And then I saw another name and went, wait, no, that's from the same story. So yeah, the 3 characters from Egotism are also in The Christmas Banquet. And like I said, it's another story within a story. Roderick tells him a story he came up with about a group of people in a town who decide every Christmas they're going to send out invitations to the 10 most miserable people, I feel like, in the world. It might be within the country, it might be within the town, but I feel like it's pretty much within the world. And so every year, 10 people get an invitation. They show up to this banquet, and there's always one man there who nobody else feels like he should be there. They're like, you're not miserable. Your life is fine. Why are you even here? And it's the same man every year, but the other 9 people change every year. And it's not until the end of the story that he finally tells the people why it is that he is there and why he's the most miserable person of them all. Then we have the Artist of the Beautiful. And this one is about a man who has a job as a watchmaker. But he really has this idea in mind of like this beautiful artistic thing that he really wants to make. But every time he starts making progress on it, something sets him back. I'm not sure how much more I can really say than that. That's the hard part with short stories, but I probably enjoyed The Antique Ring and The Christmas Banquet more than that one in the end. But there were some things, I don't know if I tabbed any of the quotes in there. That's the hard part, is I don't know which ones I tabbed quotes in and which ones I didn't. Oh yeah, I tabbed something and it's a paragraph that's an entire page long. I'm not reading all that. There were good points made in the story, but not necessarily one of my favorites. All right, then we got to Earth's Hollow. This one I loved. So, but trying to think of how to describe it. This is a story about people who come to the middle of the United States from all across the world, and they're having a big bonfire where they are just burning stuff. And it's very specific types of things that are mentioned that are being burned. And the only thing I'm going to mention is the very first one, just to give you an idea. But it's people burning anything that sets them apart in name. So this is one thing I noted when I was reading the story, is that we really don't have this as much today, at least in the US. To an extent we do, but not in the way we used to. It used to be much more prominent that people were known and were given any kind of credibility because of who their ancestors were. So, the I'm so-and-so, son of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, used to be a really big deal. Family crest used to be a really big deal. They're really not in this country anymore. But it's those types of things that people were burning. They were burning family crest. They were burning rankings from like the military, different things like that. Anything that would show like, this is who I am. This is, what my parents, my grandparents, whatever were known for. This is a rank that I had that I passed down to my children. Anything like that. Those were the types of things that they burned first. There's a lot of other things that get mentioned, but I did find it interesting that the first one they mentioned, I'm like, that's not really as much of a thing anymore. Like I said, to a degree it is, but not to the degree that it used to be, at least in our country. It might be still in other countries, but not in ours. So I found it interesting because I'm like, if that's the first step, does that mean that we're already taking steps towards those other things that he mentions in the story? But just the ideas he explored in that story of getting rid of all of these different things and what it means to get rid of them, and then asking the question of, does it even make a difference if we do? So that one I really, really enjoyed. All right, next we had Drown's Wooden Image. And this one is, I will say it was not one of my favorites. It's about a man who works in woodworking, and he gets a commission, from what I recall, to carve an image in wood that's going to go on the front of a ship. And he carves this beautiful woman. Everybody is enthralled with it. And then what feels like a manifestation of that woman seems to appear in town. It was one of those stories where I'm like, I feel like he's done similar things in some of his other stories, where this thing is going on and then all of a sudden over here we see something that resembles that, but I feel like he's done it better in other stories. I still enjoyed my time reading it well enough, but it wasn't a favorite. All right, and then there's just 3 more. So next was The Great Stone Face, and this is about a boy who grows up, and near his home there's a rock, this giant stone that the shape of it kind of resembles a face. And apparently there is a prophecy that someone will appear who has a face that's the same as the Great Stone Face. And so he is waiting and waiting for this prophecy to come true. It's another one that it's good. It was interesting. What I actually thought might ultimately happen in the story is what did ultimately happen. It didn't wrap it up the way I expected it to, but that was what happened. Then we have Ethan Brand. This one was a little bit more odd. So Ethan Brand in this story is a man who left his town 20 years prior to the story to seek out and find out what the unpardonable sin is. And in this story, he returns. He ran a lime kiln when he originally lived there, which is where apparently they take, I'm assuming limestone, they put it in a kiln, burn it, and then what comes out is what they use to make marble. So he returns to where his lime kiln was, and now there's another man and his son who are running it. And so the three of them get to talking about what he was doing, what he found out, and there's more to it than that. It definitely had a surprising ending. I did not see that ending coming. Yeah, that was a little bit darker story. And some of his stories can have a little bit of a dark tone to them, but this one was definitely a darker one. All right, and the last one was Feathertop. This one was bizarre. So this one is about a woman who is a declared witch, and she puts together this scarecrow for her fields. But then she decides this scarecrow looks too good to just be a scarecrow. And so she smokes heavily with a pipe, and so she gives the scarecrow her pipe, and through having it puff on the smoke, the scarecrow ends up coming to life and taking on more of a human form. And then she names the scarecrow Feathertop and sends him out to try to woo, I can't remember if it's the governor now, but someone of higher rank. She sends him out to woo that man's daughter. Yeah, this was an interesting story, but again, it was one of those where the ending of it, I really liked what I had to say. So I do think my favorite from this weekend was definitely Earth's Hollow. I really liked the ideas he was exploring with that story. I liked a lot of the other stories that I read, but Earth's Hollow definitely topped all of them. Honestly, I did enjoy most of the stories in here. There were some, mostly the ones I read this year, which were kind of in the middle of when he was publishing short stories, that I didn't care for as much. But his earlier ones and a lot of his later ones I did really enjoy. If you have an interest in his stories, his short stories, especially if you don't mind stories that have a little bit of a supernatural or maybe a little more gothic feel to them, I would recommend checking these out. But at the same time, while I did enjoy them, I'm just happy to finally have this done after so long. Alright, so that's what I finished over the weekend. I at least got one of the 2 books done, which honestly was more than I was starting to think I was going to get done, so I'm happy with that. If you've read either of the 2 books that I talked about today, let me know what you thought about them. And if you have read some of Nathaniel Hawthorne's short stories, let me know what some of your favorites were. I did find out that a couple of the stories in here are part of a 4-part short story series. I think it's called The Legends of Province House or something to that effect. But only 2 of them are in here, and there's 4 in total. So I know I need to go find the other 2. There were 4 in here that I had already read before, so I did not reread them. And those were Young Goodman Brown, which I have read way too many times. I know that story forwards, backwards, and inside out at this point. The Maypole of Merrymount, The Birthmark, and Rappaccini's Daughter. So those I did not reread as I went through this book. I just wanted to read the ones I hadn't read before. But I think I would like to go back and read some of those again. Especially the Maypole of Merrymount, because I shouldn't say I didn't care for it. It wasn't a favorite when I read it. It was like, okay, this was a nice story, and I moved on. The Birthmark and Rappaccini's Daughter, I loved. Young Goodman Brown, I don't even have an opinion on anymore. I had to read that story so many times for a criticism class in college. I literally had to write 8 essays from 8 different criticism viewpoints in college on that one story. That's why I say I know that story forwards, backwards, and inside out. It got to the point with the last 3 or 4 essays that I knew the exact quote I wanted and I knew the exact wording for it. I just had to find the page number when I was writing the essays and needed to do citations. So yeah, I don't even have an opinion on that story anymore. I can't tell you, do I like the story? Do I not? What do I like about it? What do I not? It just is. But yes, if you've read any of his short stories at all, let me know which ones you liked or didn't like. If you read any of the ones that I talked about today, let me know what you thought about them. And other than that, I hope you all are having a wonderful day. I hope you had a productive weekend as well. And I will see you in my next video.